Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Dave Campbell, and you are listening to Clarity from Chaos. If you're new to the show and you like what we're doing here, take a moment to go to my website on Substack. The site address is clarityfromchaos.substack.com. There you can find all of my archive shows, see the upcoming guests for the month, and if you choose to support the show, you can do so by clicking on the subscribe button. Before we get into this edition of Clarity, I would like to share just a few thoughts. Today we are seeing, and I think everybody's realizing this at this point, the rise of the Democrat socialists like we've never before seen in our country. They have helped over 250 socialists become elected in this country since 2019, including the mayor currently, or the mayor-elect, of the most powerful city on the planet. They have been successful in rewriting history, reintroducing racism, creating the concept of privileged classes, and determining what we can or cannot say in public discourse, in the military, and even in our houses of worship. These people are out to destroy our country and are doing so because it was founded, I believe, on a Judeo-Christian idea, and they cannot stand it. Make no mistake, this is a conflict that needs to be won spiritually. We need to stop thinking in terms of Democrat, Republican, global elites, and corporate media as adversaries and start thinking more biblical. We need to elect people that answer to a higher authority in our government and not to the puppet masters that they answer to today. We are incredibly pleased to welcome the author of a fabulous book, Deficit Delusion: Why Everything Left, Right, and Supply Side Tells You About the National Debt Is Wrong, Mr. John Tamny. John is the political editor at Forbes, senior economic advisor to the Torito Research and Trading, and the editor of RealClearMarkets.com. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Your book, does it discuss the unfunded issues in our national debt? And what I'm talking about, obviously, is we constantly hear about the $37 trillion that we're behind on, right? But they don't particularly talk about the unfunded Medicare number, which is 67.1 trillion, or Social Security, which is 51.6 trillion. They never talk about that. They never add it into the deficit that they discuss. Your thoughts around that? I mean, obviously we're looking at 100 and something $30 trillion that we're upside down on.
It's a great question. And in fact, my book does, in the penultimate chapter, address both. It may surprise you how I address it, but I think ultimately you'll appreciate my conclusion. The chapter says, it's titled roughly, "Whatever you do, do not allow them to reform Medicare or Social Security." Let me explain. I think Medicare, you like this. I think Medicare and Social Security were both disastrous ideas. The very notion that government should plan a retirement plan for people is laughable. And as we've seen over the decades, Americans have done a very good job of planning for that themselves. Same with Medicare. Yet I argue against reforming either, and I do for a reason. Americans are innovative, they're a market, and they've largely innovated around these two disastrous programs. And so I make a case, let them continue to grow and do so because they make it much more difficult for Congress to introduce new programs that will only grow and grow. And so my argument is this: they are two knowns, they are two disastrous knowns, but we know what they are.
Hmm.
If you reform them, let's say you reform both and you save trillions of dollars a year, you've basically handed Congress trillions of dollars to dream up all new programs that will grow and grow and
Yeah,
grow. And so
absolutely.
I make a case that I know it sounds counterintuitive, that these are actually barriers to much bigger growth in government. And so
Y-
let them exist, let them handcuff Congress, and then I throw in there interest on the debt, even better. Talk
Okay.
about something that hamstrings Congress. That what you mean, all they can do with all this revenue coming in is just pay off debt? Well, please do it some more.
Yeah,
Better
exactly.
than thinking up new programs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think there needs to be any new programs. And the interesting thing is they don't have to eat their own dog food anyway, right? That
Mhm,
they're set up to where their retirements and stuff like that are completely differentiated between what the common folks get to deal with. Um,
mhm.
so I don't disagree with you at all. And what comes to mind based on what you just said was this whole argument over the ACA that they shut the government down for, right? To try to refund and implement some more money into the ACA, which is, the whole healthcare fiasco that Obama got thrown out there. So I think your argument has some weight to it because you give them the opportunity, they're just going to find something they can screw up even more.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's start with the obvious. Medicare began as a $3 billion program, and now
Yeah,
it's 1 trillion.
right,
And we know why that's true. Ronald Reagan experienced this when he got into the White House. He obviously had plans for all sorts of the slashing or mothballing of all sorts of government programs that he wanted to oversee, but he quickly realized that behind every program was not just a Democrat, but a Republican. And over
right,
time, the constituency behind each program grows. And so, again, my perfect world is a government that has neither Social Security nor Medicare. But if you're going to give me a choice between those that we know and or a bunch of new programs that will start small and that will slowly grow until they're very big,
right,
to me the answer is obvious.
right. Well, when you say grow, is common. I think of the term metastasize because it
Okay.
because that tends to be what happens, right? It's
You
a
put a word
tumor.
on it.
Yeah, it's a tumor that continues to grow, right? And
Yes,
nobody has the wherewithal to excise the tumor. They just keep feeding it.
that's right.
So in one of the latest 60-minute things, Andrew Sorkin came out and basically compared Trump's economy to the 29 the upcoming 29 fiasco, right? Where the stock market collapsed. Your thoughts around that? Because personally, I'm not seeing it, but I'm just a layperson here.
Oh gosh, Andrew Ross Sorkin's book was ridiculous, and I
Yeah.
wrote a 5 or 6,000 word review eviscerating it. What
Okay.
he doesn't understand is that he doesn't have a book at all, if not for the mistakes made after October of 1929. But he didn't grasp that. He didn't really touch on that in the book.
Right.
All he said was that, well, stocks were going up. And so somehow, because they were going up, that signaled a big crash, which is utter nonsense. In truth, markets do correct on occasion. That's either a sign of an unexpected legislative mistake on the way. Certainly, Smoot-Hawley would qualify from 1929, but it's also frequently a sign of the economy gaining strength, of basically bad companies being put out to pasture so that they can be replaced with good ones. I mean, think of think of the year 2000. What was the most valuable company in the world? GE. What was the next GE? It was Tyco. What were the two darlings of the internet? AOL and Yahoo.
Right.
Enron was the best managed company in the world. The fact that they were allowed to slowly shrink or disappear altogether was a sign of enormous economic strength. And so the idea that a market correction could lead to the 1930s is so at odds with the reality, one doesn't know where to begin.
Right.
And so Sorkin buys into all the economic fallacies on the way to not understand why he has a book in the first place. We've had other market corrections. We had one in
Us-
1987. Why aren't there books about that? Well, there aren't, because Ronald Reagan, kind of like his favorite president was a Calvin Coolidge. And so his response was not to do a bunch of big government in response to a market correction. Conversely, in 1929, Hoover and then Roosevelt foisted lots of big government on us and got predictably awful results. I would argue that George W. Bush was Hoover to Barack Obama's FDR in 2008 and beyond. And so similarly, we look back to 2008 as something that was
Right.
harmful for a long time, but no one understands that the harm was not rooted in a correction about housing.
No.
It was rooted in the Bush administration's disastrous decision to intervene in a very healthy market correction. The Bush administration caused the so-called financial crisis. So let's not call it financial. And then Barack Obama was FDR. He just continued to make mistakes.
He just doubled down on it. Absolutely.
Doubled down, much as FDR doubled down on Hoover's mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And in thinking about that, I'm just wondering the role of the Fed that played in all of that, particularly in the '08 piece, because we ultimately, as taxpayers, bailed out all the bad decision making, right? So I'm just wondering, because I think at least right now it seems like Trump is kind of pushing back a little bit on the Fed. I'm just wondering if it's, but they just renewed the charter. I'm just wondering the validity of the Fed at this point.
I make a case in a number of books that we vastly overstate the Fed's power over interest rates, one way or the other.
Okay.
If the Fed had a fraction of the power that we assume, then we would be a desperately poor, shrunken, destitute economy. And I base this on kind of the obvious. Interest rates other than the dollar are the most important price in the world. And so if the Fed really were that powerful, boy, we'd be in a world of hurt, yet we
Yeah.
continue to evolve. And so, but there's an important clarity that I don't think that you would fight me on. It wasn't the Fed fiddling with interest rates in the 2000s that was the problem. Figure markets are always, I mean, not that I liked it, but markets are always pricing the future, and they didn't crash in response to Greenspan going to 1% or anything.
Right. Right.
On the other hand, think about what Ben Bernanke said to George W. Bush in 2008. He said, I've studied economic downturns, and if you don't bail out the banks, you face the mother of all great depressions that will make the 90s look like child's play and it
Right.
will last decades. What Bernanke said was so at odds with sanity, reality, anything having anything to do with economic prosperity. It staggers the mind that Bush, easily the worst president in my lifetime, believed this nonsense. But Bernanke influencing Bush created a financial crisis that otherwise wouldn't have happened. By definition, by saying we've got to substitute ourselves, the federal government. See, I look at the Fed and I say, don't call it the Fed, just call it the U.S. Treasury. Call it the federal government for all I care. It's just a creation of Congress. That they intervened, they created a crisis that never would have taken place if they'd done nothing.
Well, I mean, that pretty much, John, summarizes most political action, right?
Yes,
If they,
yes.
if they just leave it the hell alone, you know, external forces would correct itself anyway, right?
Absolutely.
So,
It's
it
crisis
go
is
ahead.
always the intervention. There's never a financial
Right,
crisis. That's just markets. Markets fix mistakes all the time. That's what
right,
markets do. And
right.
so remember Bush said, "Well, I believe in free markets, but markets not acting right." No, markets that just are. They're not one way or another. They're
Yeah,
just a reaction to whatever's happening. And Bush in his infinite, and this is what terrifies me about Republicans, because they are the free market party, they have a tendency to intervene because they say, well, because Republicans feel like they can go to China on market intervention. And we saw it in 2020. Once again, Donald Trump, the one time we needed him to act like Trump and say any governor so foolish as to lock his people down will have me
yeah,
visiting every single day. Instead, Trump locked us down, and worse, signed a $3 trillion CARES Act into law that subsidized lockdowns across the country.
right.
I keep telling Republicans it's easy to be limited government when times are tranquil. I want you to be limited government when times are not, and they
When it
never
counts.
fulfill that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when it counts, and, um, I like I said in the opening, John, I'm pretty much convinced at this point that there's not one whiff the difference between either party, and what scares me even worse is the influx of the DSA into what used to be the Democrats, but I don't see any kind of logic, intelligence, anything else surrounding any of this because it's all self-serving. It's not that they have a grasp of anything.
I don't disagree with you, but I suppose that's what makes me optimistic. You don't get Ronald Reagan in times of prosperity.
No, no, absolutely not.
You get Ronald Reagan in times when people are legitimately worried. I think the fact that we got Trump versus Kamala Harris and we got
My
Trump
God.
versus Biden, I do think in a way that's the world's way of telling us that Americans are, because remember, the American people are a market, and they're a
Right.
pretty darn good one. I think it's their way of saying, "We got this figured out. We know how to restrain these guys. We can elect some average people from both sides because we're much smarter than they are." And that's why I refuse to be pessimistic about New York City. My reaction to New York City is that, oh, these are the most enterprising people on earth.
Yeah.
They will run over Zoran Mamdani. I get so mad when so many people from my world say, "Oh, he's going to ruin New York City." Oh, please. If he could ruin New York City, it wouldn't be the greatest city on earth. He will not ruin it. And
No.
I think we've got to remember that capitalism gets faster than government every single day of the week, and it's just it's running away from it. And I think that's part of what's going on here with these kind of unappealing candidates we see from both sides.
Yeah, what scares me is maybe they just haven't emerged yet, John. What scares me is the the sensible, the understanding, the logical person, to your point, Trump came in because, I lived through the Carter years, and as, you know, there's a lot of people out there that have gone that didn't get to experience that wonderful time in the mid 70s. But it ushered in Reagan, right?
Yeah.
And the calamity that ushered in Trump the first time, I think he was relatively naive to the presence of DC. And then you had the 20 fiasco, the 20 election thing and everything else. And I think it gave him time to reflect on DC. And I think what you're seeing now is a much more focused, mature individual than what we had seen in 16. And I think his whole concept about embracing the forgotten man and woman in this country is probably the smartest thing I've seen in my lifetime because they've been totally ignored. And I've always said that the consuming public in this country is the actual power base in this country. They just don't sometimes exercise it properly.
Mhm. I would maybe see it a little differently about the Trump voter.
Okay.
I've always felt the characterization of the Trump voter was incredibly patronizing.
Well,
So what
that
do they
is,
say?
yeah.
Well, but even those who are sympathetic, what do they say? They say, well, the Trump voter was tired of condescending treatment from the New York Times and CNN.
Eh,
Okay, but nonsense.
yeah.
Trump voters don't watch CNN nor do they read the New York Times.
No.
They said the Trump voter was forgotten, except for, near as I can tell, the Trump voter is pretty prosperous. And we know this because the Trump voter spends a lot of money at places like the Cracker Barrel. Well, if you look at the Cracker Barrel stock in the 21st century, when the Trump voter was allegedly impoverished, it went on a wild ride, mostly upward and substantially upward. The Trump voter is worried about the border. I don't know. The Trump voter doesn't live near the border. And those coming across the border certainly weren't taking the jobs of Trump voters because Trump voters are too prosperous to lose their jobs to people coming from over. I'm sorry. I think the Trump voter likes Donald Trump. I don't think it's ideological. I think they like the man, and they like the man because they're so tired of politicians. Whatever you think of Trump's policies, he's arguably the most honest politician in a long time, and that he doesn't hide who he is.
No, and he's authentic. And I think to your
Well, yeah.
point, I think to your point, people are just sick and tired of the normal political BS. And
He's
Trump's
not.
Trump's persona is not typical political BS. It's,
Mhm.
you're a stupid person. Why are you're just a stupid person, or it's fake news, or it's this, or it's that.
Mhm.
And he basically says what most people are sitting there in their homes, in their living rooms or whatever. Yeah, that's exactly what I think that they are, right? So,
Yeah, but I also think that speaks to I think a lot of these guys who think they're going to replace him, they're trying to they're not because they're not
no.
him.
No, I don't think you're gonna replace his persona.
No, but that's where it gets interesting because I don't think the Trump vote was ever ideological. And so it'll be fascinating to see who rises up the next time
Yeah,
around because they're going to try to be like him and promote the policies. And I don't think they work even rhetorically out of the mouths of others. Again, okay, so in my case, I disagree with Trump about I think we should have a strong dollar. He wants a weak one. I disagree on tariffs. I disagree on immigration. But I'll bet you any amount of money that if Trump could take my thinking, package it in his persona, and he would win a ton of votes, just
yeah,
as he won a ton of votes this way. I just think they
yeah,
like him.
yeah, yeah. I agree. So let's shift gears a little bit. What were your thoughts around and people again have a lot of different opinions about Elon Musk, but I think his exploration into the fraud and abuse in what we consider Washington D.C. and its mechanisms, I'm a little disappointed that Congress hasn't codified all of those things to put those things in place, which tells me that that they're probably as much part of the problem as what was discovered. But your thoughts around that, because he came up with all kinds of fraud and abuse that's out there, you know?
Oh, well, Elon Musk is brilliant, and I'm so proud to be in a country that attracts people like him. I love every minute of it. I'll say again, it may surprise you, but I think I could convince you to agree. I love Elon Musk. I'm critical of Doge, and in the book, I argue ahead of it happening that it wasn't going to work because the book didn't go to publication until Trump had won and everything.
Right.
And let me explain why. Let's say it's the same thing as my argument against reforming Medicare and Social Security. Let's say Elon Musk and Doge could have saved us $2 trillion. Oh, how terrifying.
Yeah.
No act of government saving ever subtracts from government spending. It just shifts it. And the idea that, oh, we've just saved $2 trillion and we're going to give it back to you. Oh, please. And so
Right.
I wasn't in favor of Doge mainly because I want what exists to swallow up more and more of the budget so that there can't be new things that exist.
Right.
My argument is that we have the debt not because of overspending. Oh my gosh, what an insulting thing to markets. The markets are so stupid. Oh, we've overspent, just lend us money. That's not how the world works.
Right.
We have all the debt because the markets are confident that we take in enormous amounts of money now. But much more dangerously, we're going to take in exponentially more tax dollars in the future. So any entity that is known to be taking in a lot more in the future is going to be able to borrow with ease. And so my argument in the book is that we've got a too much revenue problem. And until we address that, we're never going to bring that down the debt because, politicians exist to spend. That's why they're there. And so if we keep sending them more money, which is what left, right, supply side, liberty, they all say government needs more money to pay off the debt. Well, it's had gobs more money year after year since 1980. And predictably, as any rational person would see, we've seen the debt skyrocket. Well, of course, that's what happened. But if let's say revenue had stayed at 500 billion, which is roughly what it was in 1980, does anyone seriously think we'd have all this debt right now? There's no chance. No one lends to an entity that can't pay it back. The problem is we can too easily pay all the debt back, and that's why everyone wants to lend to us.
Yep. 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 You had talked about gold as an inflation indicator. Can we spend a few moments on that? Because I don't think people really are looking at that.
Yeah, sad. Well, why was the world for so many centuries and realistically millennia, why did they have their currencies tied to gold?
Exactly.
Was it just random? Was it sunspots? Was it religion? No, it was the markets. The global marketplace happened upon gold. And why did they? They did because gold holds its value. It's the constant. The dollar, gold doesn't move. The dollar in which it's priced moved. The Swiss franc in which it's priced moved. The British pound, the Chinese yuan, go down the list. When gold is going up in dollars, that means the dollar is in decline. And it's that simple, and it's that unfortunate. And we see the gold price at all-time highs or roughly near them. And I think this is the biggest barrier to Donald Trump having a successful presidency. And I don't think anything else comes close. You can't devalue the dollar and have a successful presidency. A, because Americans earn dollars, but B, economic growth is an effective investment. And if the policy, as Trump wants, presidents get the dollar they want, is to devalue the dollar, you're basically putting a tax on investment.
Yeah. I heard, and forgive me, I just heard it in passing about a push, and there's been a push over the years to eliminate the income tax. There's been a push ever since it was established. Any thoughts around that? Because I'm just wondering, you mentioned a minute ago about we don't have a deficit problem, we have a revenue problem in this country. And I'm just wondering if eliminating the income tax as we see it today would go anywhere near starting to move the needle that direction.
Possibly. I don't see it happening simply because the people in Congress want to retire brilliantly too, and a crazy tax code is their friend. That's how once they're in
Exactly.
office,
Yeah.
they can lobby it in different directions, and so it's
Right.
too advantageous to the members of Congress on both sides to keep what's incomprehensible in place.
Yeah.
But let's say this: Americans hate the IRS, which means
Yeah.
they hate Congress. All the IRS, it's an outsourced function of Congress. They're too afraid to do this to us face to face, so they pay someone else to do it, which is just shameful.
Yeah.
You know how we do it, I think, and I don't think people realize this. You don't change Washington from within Washington. You change Washington by changing the minds of people outside with shows like yours.
Yeah.
And so I make a case in the book that a tax on Elon Musk is a tax on all of you, because the billions he hands over to the federal government is billions of control the federal government has over the economy. They don't stare lovingly at Elon Musk's money. They spend it. They control the economy with Elon Musk's money.
Right.
And so I make this case, the gradual case of saying, look at all the great corporate innovations, all the entrepreneurial innovations that are always a function of investment. The rich, precisely because they're so rich that they can't buy more houses realistically, they can't buy more planes. All they can do is invest what they have excess. Which means when you overtax the rich, which we clearly do, that's why we have 38 trillion in debt. That's not because we're undertaxing the other 99%. It's because we're overtaxing the 1%.
Right.
When you overtax them, you are putting a huge barrier up to progress and jobs and opportunity and healthcare advances and private jets for all that will happen.
Just innovation. Yeah.
Innovation.
Innovation in general. Right.
And so, okay, so all you true believers out there, let's start talking about this not in terms of, well, GDP will go up 3%. Start talking about it in terms of what are we not achieving?
Yeah.
Because we overtax the rich so much. Let's have this conversation over and over again. The debt? Oh, yeah, of course we have the debt. The rich are overtaxed. They send too much money to Washington, hence Washington can borrow with ease. Oh, and by the way, all that poverty, all the things that we don't have, it's because we overtax the rich. Opportunity is substantially reduced because we tax the people most capable of investing in innovation. And then let's start talking about all the leaps happening before our eyes. That might convince people that, gosh, this really is counterproductive to overtax the rich in the way we do. We are really putting a bullseye on all of us by going after the Elon Musks of the world. Maybe we could start. We don't even have this discussion now.
No.
Left, right, supply side. All they do is talk. What do the supply siders say? They say, well, we're going to cut your taxes by raising them. Right. Every ideology, every economic persuasion, they all talk about getting more money to Washington.
Right.
And so let's start having this other discussion and slowly change minds.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a whole platform, right? That's a whole political platform right there of tax the rich. There isn't, I have not heard, other than what you and I just talked about, I have not heard any kind of discussion over the suppression of innovation and what it's really causing as far as the deficit and everything else by just simply saying you're going to tax those nasty billionaires. You're going to get their money.
Yes.
Why not?
Well, what did Steve Bannon say during Trump's first administration? He said, I'd like to see a 4 in front of the top tax rate on the rich.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Republicans. This one's so obvious.
Yeah, that's
Yet
my point.
Republicans are terrified. And remember the Trump tax cuts in his first they didn't reduce taxes on the rich. They largely raised them on the rich. Remember how the top rate was brought down ever so slightly, but see, most of the rich live in California and New York. And so when you took away the SALT deduction, the rich pay. I've yet to meet a rich person who didn't pay more under Trump. I mean, come on, guys, this one's obvious. Republicans are terrified to make a case for tax cuts for the rich.
Precisely. But they're giving that whole platform, John, they're giving that whole platform to the Democrats and allowing the Democrats and the socialists to go after the rich, those nasty SOBs out there that have all of this money. Nobody is making a counter argument, except we just did tonight, about the degradation of innovation and all of the other components that comes along with that argument.
Yep. Well, because, see, you can't. What I describe in the book is I say, the crisis of debt is unseen. It's what's not taking place. It's all the Amazons and Metas and Googles that aren't being created, all the private jets for everyone that aren't being created. You can't talk about an unseen, but we need to start talking. That's the real crisis. Yep. The debt is so minuscule relative to what it all means, all the innovation that's not happening. Yeah. Yet you can't get Republicans to talk about it. All they want to do is, well, if we cut taxes this level, we'll get this much GDP growth and it'll lead to this much revenue. What a loser argument. No wonder we're not winning.
Well,
and can I throw into you that no matter what happens, They say about every Republican tax cut that it's just a tax cut for the rich. It never is.
Right.
But since they're saying that anyway, why not for once meet them at this and say, oh, yeah, we're going to slash this to bits? But they never do.
No, not at all. And I, I think to me, it's a winning argument, but it needs to be articulated over and over and over again, because all anybody's heard is the flip side of that argument, right? Is you have, the evil Rockefellers, for God's sake, right? The people with all the money. And, you sit there and listen to Bernie Sanders rail about this topic, but you don't have any Republicans countering it with what we just talked about. None of them. None of them. Not at all. Yeah, and they shouldn't be, because it's literally, it's the solution that's and I shouldn't say that it keeps eluding them, because maybe they understand it and they just want the problem to continue. I hate for them to be that malicious, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. But I'm convinced they don't even grasp it. I really don't.
Well, and that's probably the other part. And then you have a consuming public that doesn't grasp it either. It needs to be broken down to where it's a consumable argument, where everybody in the diners, in the Waffle Houses across this country can understand it in very, very simple terms and embrace it, right? Because right now it's just, they have this whole rich versus the poor argument, right? And the Republicans either can't, or, to your point, don't know how to articulate the difference. And that's a shame. That's a shame right there. So hugely. And especially Americans love rich people. I think part of why they love Donald Trump is they like rich people. Right.
Again,
he doesn't back away from it either.
To make the argument.
Right. Well, exactly. Because he certainly doesn't back away from it. I mean, he wears it with pride, as so he should, right?
Yes.
So, where can people find your book, John? Because
you can find it on Amazon. Buy as many copies as you want for friends, family members, enemies.
And it's Christmas. It's Christmas.
Yeah,
so give it as a Christmas
gift. Timing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, personal website or anything?
Yeah, well, there's I'm Parkview Institute, so parkviewinstitute.org, you can find me, but also realclearmarkets.com. I'm editor of that. You can find me on Twitter. I'm very opposite in thinking relative to people on both sides, and good. The world needs people like us and to change some minds. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I just think that the discussion as it stands today is really beneath us. And so I'm doing my best.
Yeah. And to be brutally honest about it, most people don't understand it or even try to understand it, right? They just consume whatever the little soundbite is that they get, and they go with that. They couldn't articulate it one way or the other. So, but they do know rich versus poor. That part they do. I mean, that's almost visceral to people. They do understand that. So if you can articulate what that really means, and the attack on the rich is a fool's errand, then I think there's a winning plank there to start moving the needle a little bit.
Absolutely. Look, it's our job to articulate for them. And that's what's great about your show, that we have a chance to do that. And more people need to do it. If we can change people's minds, we'll change Washington. But you don't change Washington without changing the electorate's mind. So it's our job.
Yep. There you go. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know we've batted back and forth trying to put this thing together, but we got it accomplished, and I certainly would like to continue the conversation on and on and on and on and on as we start to move forward with some of this stuff. So you can expect to hear from me periodically as we move forward.
All right. Well, thank you, David, so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the conversation, John. It's been spectacular, and I think the audience will get an awful lot out of it. So thank you. And don't talk to you again. Have a very Merry Christmas.
Likewise.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.